The Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, OnScreen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Hello, everybody, and welcome to OnScreen, the official podcast of The Total Screen. My name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And today, as usual, we are going to be talking about The Last of Us. We took a break last week, so that means we're covering 2 episodes this week. We also have some stuff to talk about that's coming up on the horizon. Let's get started with that. On the horizon. This week, upcoming, we have Like a Dragon Ishin, the remake, coming on Tuesday, February 21st for PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X. On Thursday, February 23rd, we have Bel-Air returning for its, I believe, 2nd season on Peacock. Then we have a show called The Consultant coming on Friday, February 24th to Amazon Prime. This stars Christoph Waltz, and it is about a sociopath consultant at a mobile game company. Actually watched the trailer for it. It looked pretty interesting. Then also on Friday, February 24th, Party Down returns on Starz. The Reluctant Traveler, which is a travel series with Eugene Levy from the American Pie movies, is coming on Friday, February 24th as well to Apple TV+. Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe comes out also on Friday, February 24th for the Nintendo Switch, as does Octopath Traveler 2, which is also hitting PS4, PS5, and PC. And Cocaine Bear hits theaters on February 24th this Friday. So that's what's up on the horizon. Now let's go into our main segment where we are going to be discussing 2 episodes of The Last of Us, and that is full spoilers. This week on Full Spoilers, as we said, we're covering The Last of Us Season 1, Episode 4, Please Hold to My Hand, and Season 1, Episode 5, Endure and Survive. It's kind of a 2-parter. It's the same director for both episodes, and it's the same basic kind of story. So every episode of The Last of Us has kind of been like a new location, like it's as they're traveling.
Yeah.
And this is the first one where we were really kind of in one place for 2 episodes.
These 2 episodes together tell the story of Kansas City and what went down there.
Yeah, Kansas City is acting as a stand-in for Pittsburgh, which was in the game. And here it's Kansas City, and we're not really told if that's Missouri or Kansas, because there are 2 Kansas cities. But we know it's Kansas City.
And I guess it's the Missouri one.
I've never been to either, so I just don't know. But we know that what happened previous to us arriving with the show in Kansas City is that Fedra, which is just like the remnants of the government that have taken over these cities and ruling with an iron fist and raping and murdering their populations, was overthrown in Kansas City.
Yes.
And you basically, they're doing the kind of, and they're doing the kind of like French Revolution style story here in which, you know, the French Revolution took over France and then just became just as bad, if not worse, than the French government was that it took over from. And that's kind of the story we're getting here, is that these revolutionaries have taken over for Fedra, and they're just being brutal, absolutely brutal to everybody that they see as complicit, the collaborators.
Yeah, collaborators. So anybody who snitched on their neighbors to Fedra or cooperated with Fedra in any capacity are seen by these revolutionaries as enemies, and they are killed.
Yeah, this is being led by a woman named Kathleen, who is just absolutely brutal.
Yes.
And absolutist, too. She's just absolutist in the sense that she is just like, you know, well, you tried to change something, and that shouldn't have been changed, so now you're going to die. And no, I'm not going to, you know, it's very much like she's got her own, like, revenge plot, and it's basically taken over everything. Yeah. So rather than seeing to the needs of the city that she's she's now in control of. She's just focusing everything on getting her revenge, which later ends up, biting not just her and her whole city.
In particular, revenge against a man named Henry.
In the first episode, basically what we get is her constantly going, like, every time something's going wrong, she's like, Henry's behind this.
Yes, yeah.
As if he's some, like, evil mastermind, We're like, who's Henry? Who's this Henry, this evil warlord general that we haven't met yet, that is controlling everything behind the scenes and causing chaos and disrepair? Who is this Henry? That is kind of like our impression from the first episode.
This mastermind, right?
Yeah.
Because she kind of, like, paints him as some genius mastermind, foiling her plans at every turn.
Of course, we're following Joel and Ellie. They arrive in Kansas early in the episode.
They're taking a detour because they ran into a roadblock on the highway. One of the tunnels is just completely blocked. And so Joel's first instinct is to not go into the cities because cities are typically full of infected.
Or just bad people,
Yeah. But cities more often than not are full of infected. I mean, there are a lot of people in cities.
Density.
It's a prime vector for infections. But Joel just says, F it, and he decides to chance it and go through Kansas City as a detour. When they enter the city, they're immediately accosted by a man asking for help, appearing injured. Joel, being smart, doesn't fall for it. He plows right into the guy, which surprises Ellie, but we find out very quickly that it was a trick anyway, which is what Joel already knew.
They wanted the truck to pull up to a certain point in which there was somebody else with like a barrel, and they dropped it on the car, and they still were able to drop it on the car, but just not enough to do damage until they started firing at him and stuff, and until they hit the spike strip trying to get away. But it was an ambush.
Yeah, it was an ambush.
Have you ever seen the movie Children of Men?
A long time ago.
It's like Alfonso Cuarón, I think. No, is it? Yeah, it's Alfonso Cuarón movie.
I saw that like ages ago. I barely
Do you remember the ambush scene in that where they were going down the road and the flaming truck went down in front, and then it was like this big one-er shot where it was like following with one camera. It's kind of what this made me think of. I mean, it wasn't as elaborate as that, but it was just the idea of like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like the idea of being caught in an ambush and trying to get out of it is what was like so central to that scene to me, like what it was reminiscent of to me. But yeah, so they end up in this big shootout. They're in a building, Joel sends Ellie like through like a hole in the wall to kind of hide away. She ends up going out of there and ends up saving his life because somebody kind of gets the better of him in a moment. But, he has to kill this person that's like begging for his life and stuff. And, it's kind of playing into that idea of Joel being kind of ruthless or something.
Yeah.
Although from what I've been hearing, a lot of people are saying one of the kind of quasi complaints people have been having about the series is that Joel is like much more ruthless and distant in the games than he is in the show.
I don't know. I don't really care about comparisons with the games. I mean, we see it. They're doing some things differently here. What I see here is like Joel is a survivor, and so he does what it takes to survive in this world. And like it or not, that sometimes that means leaving compassion behind. Like you can see like the ploy here depends on the Mark having empathy for somebody else's plight.
Mm-hmm.
They want the Mark to stop and try to help them.
And then they'll kill him and rob him blind.
Yes. Joel knows that it could be genuine, but it's just too much of a risk to take that bet.
Well, he has a conversation later on with Ellie when she questions him about it, and he says that he's been on both sides of it, like that it's not something he's proud of, but when he was trying to survive in the early days of the post-apocalypse, like he was doing that kind of stuff. So he immediately knew what this was. It wasn't even so much that he was going, this could be wrong. It's more just like, this is exactly something I've done before.
Yeah.
And so it was like something very obvious to him, but something that Ellie is not yet weary enough to understand.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But Ellie ends up saving him, and doing so she exposes that she had that gun that she was hiding from the last episode. Joel takes that temporarily and ends up kind of giving it back to her at some other point. By the way, we're going to be discussing this kind of all in one run because these two episodes kind of fit together.
Well, they do fit together.
Yeah. So I just mean like we're not going to go and then on to the next episode. We're kind of going all this together.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the majority of the early Joel and Ellie story.
I mean, the big thing here is that Ellie kills a man.
Well, she hurts a man. Joel's the one
that's
that
right.
kills
Joel
him.
kills him. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, she shoots him and basically renders him unable to move.
Mm-hmm.
And he's begging for his life, and then Ellie goes back to where she was hiding, and she listens to Joel kill the man.
Yes. And that's where we've moved forward with the relationship between Joel and Ellie and how that's developing, and with Ellie learning the realities of the world that she's been sheltered from this whole time. She does have a moment where she's talking about, and Joel's very apologetic that she had to like hurt somebody and that that's his fault because he lost his advantage. He was put into a bad spot. In order to save him, she had to hurt somebody, and he's apologizing that she had to do that for the first time, and she remarks that it's not the first time. But she won't share what was the first time. You know, she doesn't want to talk about that.
They quickly realize this wasn't a group of bandits and that they are surrounded, so that the entire city is after them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they make a plan to get to this office building to find somewhere safe temporarily so that they can make further plans about what they're going to do.
Well, they want to get to the top of the building. They want to get to the roof so they can get an overview of the city.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what they want to do, and they know they're not going to be able to make it initially on the first night. So they're like, we're just going to climb as far as we can, and then we're going to stop for the night, and then the next morning we're going to go the rest of the way up, get a view of the city, and figure out what we're going to do.
Yes.
Meanwhile, while all of this is going on, we have kind of two other storylines progressing. One involves Henry and Sam, these two new characters that come into play in these episodes, and the other around Kathleen, the kind of monster-like figure that we've mentioned.
Kathleen,
kind of reminiscent of the governor from The Walking Dead.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about Kathleen first. So Kathleen, as we've mentioned, is just out for blood for Henry. And I also mentioned that she is not properly taking care of the concerns that are more pressing for the city because she's so focused on revenge. And the major concern that I'm addressing here is Fedra, when they were in power, the way they handled the infected was that they just drove them all underground.
Yes. The reason Kansas City is not full of infected is because Fedra managed to drive them underground and kind of seal them away.
Yeah. And we have a scene where Kathleen is with her lieutenant, who is Perry, who is, by the way, played by Jeffrey Pierce, who was the voice of Tommy in the game.
Yeah.
But Perry and her are in a building. He was also
unjustified for 2 episodes.
He shows her a concern, though, which is that you can see there's a spot in the ground where the ground's like basically rumbling. Meaning there's like so many infected there.
Yeah,
that this is like an issue. Yeah.
It's like they're gonna break free eventually.
Yeah, and he's like, what are we gonna do about this? And she's like, well, we're gonna find Henry.
Yeah, we're gonna find Henry. There's one point, because he's raising concerns about other things. There's one point where Kathleen, says to him, do you think Henry is 7th priority? She's like, he is first priority.
He should be 1/1,000,000th priority.
Yeah. But Kathleen says Henry is first priority. We find out why she's so fixated on Henry versus the other informants that they've been killing. And it's not just because Henry's been, elusive or foiling her plans or been especially troublesome to her. It's because Henry, of all the informants, Henry informed on her brother, who was the leader of the resistance movement.
Mm-hmm. Who's being painted here as kind of this very beloved, forgiving person.
Yes.
Kind of the opposite of Kathleen here.
Yeah.
Somebody who kind of took care of everybody, and he was a great man and everybody loved him, and Henry turned on him and revealed him to Fedra and got him killed, and she blames him for that, and that's why he's priority number 1 for her.
She acknowledges that her brother, while in prison, asked her to forgive Henry and everything, and she says she can't do that. She doesn't operate that way. She reveals, she doesn't say it directly, but she reveals that she saw her brother as weak, and she's not going to be weak like that.
Yeah. Well, her lieutenant Perry is he makes that comment. He says when she's questioning whether or not she's doing the right thing or something, he says, "We all loved your brother, but he didn't get anything done. You did."
Right, yeah, exactly.
So it shows why kind of the city's falling behind her, because under her leadership, they were able to topple Fedra, who was reportedly a monstrous version of this remnants of the federal government that was just straight out raping and murdering and torturing for fun.
We haven't seen or learned much about Fedra since the show started.
Yeah.
Other than they're the dominant governmental force in this world now.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not necessarily a very friendly government.
Oh, no. And particularly in this city, they seem to have been very monstrous. There was a part where Joel even mentioned that, saying like, I haven't seen Fedra around. What's going on with that? I knew Fedra ruled this city with an iron fist.
Yeah.
Noting it particularly like more so than Boston is like the implication he was making. So he's kind of surprised that Fedra fell, basically. That's what he learns in that situation. So that's kind of what's going on with Kathleen's part of the story at this point. Now let's focus on Henry and Sam. These are kind of the two real central figures of these two episodes.
Like we said, Henry is a fugitive because he informed on Kathleen's brother to Fedra. Henry reveals he did that for Sam's sake.
Yeah, we find out that Sam had leukemia and that Fedra had the medicine that he needed, and the cost for getting that medicine was for him to inform on a really big and important figure in the resistance, who was Michael, that's Kathleen's brother, and that he did it in order to save his brother. But he also notes that Michael was a figure that Henry would have gladly followed.
Yes.
He was somebody that he idolized. It's not like somebody he gave up willy-nilly. He really cared about Michael. And Kathleen, when referring to the whole situation with Michael and all of that, and Henry says that Michael would have asked for forgiveness. She says, in fact, he did ask for forgiveness for Henry, to say don't go after him, but that she was going to anyway.
Kathleen is not about forgiveness, so that's not her thing, unfortunately for Henry and Sam.
This actually puts a little bit of tension between Joel and Henry initially, because Henry reveals to Joel that he was a collaborator, and Joel's first reaction to that, he kind of shudders a little bit and takes a step back and says, "I don't deal with rats."
Yes.
He's like, that's something vile to him. He's like, nah, oh, geez, I was sitting here talking to you, I was breaking bread with you, and now you're telling me that you're a rat?
Yeah.
That's kind of his initial reaction to it. And from that point on, he's kind of keeping Henry kind of at arm's length.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Henry's weakness is Sam. Sam is Henry's brother. When we first met them, I assumed Sam was Henry's son, but we revealed their brothers just very far apart in age, obviously.
Yes.
And Sam being Henry's younger brother, Sam is actually deaf and he speaks through sign language, and Henry's just trying to keep him alive in this world.
Mm-hmm.
That's Henry's mission right now, is to just keep Sam alive.
Yeah, exactly. That's the one person we kind of established in the third episode, that this idea that you have these groups of people, you have a protector and somebody that needs to be protected.
Yes.
And in this case, this applies to Henry and Sam, with
this is kind
Henry
of a mirror,
being the protector, willing to do anything to protect Sam.
This is kind of a mirror of Joel and Ellie,
Yes, definitely. So Henry makes himself public enemy number one by protecting Sam, by getting him the medicine he needed. And now he's dealing with the consequences of that. Henry and Sam see Joel and Ellie when they break into the city, track them, follow them, and they confront them because they know, well, we're from the city. We know the city. We can help you get out of here. We know the right routes to take, but we need you to help us get out of here because you're the muscle. We know that you can, we saw you, take out the people that we're trying to.
One of the things Henry reveals is that Henry reveals he's killed somebody, but not directly. He's never shot a person like he saw Joel do.
Yeah.
When Henry's story again, like we said, is he killed Kathleen's brother by informing on him.
Mm-hmm.
So he was never directly involved with any violence. So when he's holding the gun at Joel, it's kind of just for show, because he's never done anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. He's doing what he can to kind of get, Joel and Ellie not to kill him, basically, him and his brother, and so that they can negotiate. But he's very clearly, does not want to, he's not even playing it up too much. He's not even trying to act tough with it. He's basically holding the gun on him and saying, I want to put this down. Can we just talk? Can we just promise we're not going to kill each other? And just talk? Yeah. And Joel's kind of Joel will say yeah, okay, but he'll say it in a way that sounds like a threat, and Ellie's like, oh, come on, Joel. Yeah. You're not helping.
Ellie's like, he always sounds like this.
He has a resting bitch voice.
Yeah.
So they get along until the point that Joel learns that Henry was a collaborator, and then he's keeping it at arm's length. But they're going through the plan anyways. Henry reveals that his plan is for them to use the underground tunnels.
One of the great things is we see Ellie and Sam developing a really good friendship.
Oh yeah, they're bonding over a comic book series called Savage Starlight that they both are collecting issues of. It's a very video gamey trope in there that there's collectible collections. Oh, I have these ones and you have those ones.
Yeah, exactly.
If we put them together, we have a more complete collection. But yeah, they're bonding throughout it.
And we find out more of the history of Kansas City post-apocalypse. We find out that people made settlements underground initially after the world went sideways. Those settlements obviously did not last, because we find the remnants of an abandoned settlement, like a kid's playroom, underground.
Yeah, there's apparently a pretty cool Easter egg for a game reference in there for a character named Ish or something that was, I guess, you don't directly interact with in the game, but you collect letters from or something, or see traces of his story.
Yeah.
And there's a little reference to that in here as well, that he was part of this underground settlement. But like I said, they're gonna go into the underground. Henry had mentioned to Joel that they had driven all the infected underground, and so Joel's like, well, then why the fuck are we gonna go underground? And Henry's like, oh no, I talked to a guy from Fedra, and he said a few years ago that they got rid of all the infected.
Which is funny, because going underground and stuff, you think, oh, definitely there's going to be infected showing up underground. Henry's going to be wrong or mistaken or have out-of-date information, and they're going to get attacked. Yeah, that's the video game thing to do, and surprise, you do have to shoot a bunch of infected in that area when you go underground in the game. Doesn't happen here, though.
Yeah, in the episode, it's just kind of more of the haunting scene of this former settlement that's got lots of children's drawings up on the wall and stuff, but nobody's there. So it's well, what happened to these people? And then you get out of that, and they're on basically the last exit street to get out of the city.
And they come across a sniper.
Yeah, it's a very World War II movie, a Full Metal Jacket scene with a sniper keeping him pinned down.
Yeah, it turns out it's an old man. He's a lookout working for Kathleen. I guess he's set up there at the edge to catch anybody trying to sneak out of town that way.
We get a big difference between, I'd mentioned before about some people complaining about Joel not being as heartless in the series as he is in the game. We get a scene that I'm guessing would never have happened in the game, in which Joel is talking to this old sniper and trying to get him to put the gun down and saying, don't make me kill you. I don't want to kill you. And going no. And the guy starts raising the gun, so he has to kill him.
Yeah.
And then after killing him, he hears on the radio, Kathleen saying, hold your position, we're on our way, or something, and he's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, he's already radioed Kathleen that he's caught.
And so Joel's trying to scream from the window of this building to Ellie and Henry and Sam, run, you need to run, and they're just, not hearing him. And then the forces arrive. The resistance forces arrive in a bunch of cars, including one that's, set up like a plow. It's just plowing through cars in the way and get them out of the way.
Oh, yeah. It's clearing the way as quickly and efficiently as possible. And they're trying to run, but the fact of the matter is that they're cornered without a way out. They're at Kathleen and her men's mercy at this point. And Kathleen makes it very clear to Henry that there is no mercy from her.
Yeah, he calls out to her and says, they're talking about the issue with the death of her brother.
Right. Henry decides to give himself up to Kathleen if she agrees to spare Sam and Joel and Ellie in exchange, but Kathleen makes it very clear there's no sparing anybody.
Yeah.
she very cold-heartedly tells Henry that Sam has to pay for what Henry did, and there's no way around that, and Joel and Ellie have to pay for killing her men when they came into the city.
Even though they were attacked, yeah.
Yeah, even though they were attacked, yeah, but yeah.
What we have here is we see how far out of it Kathleen is, because Henry's like, he's just a kid, and she's like, well, did you ever think that maybe he was supposed to die? Kids die all the time.
Yeah.
Like, with the implication that it's no big deal. Who cares?
Yeah. She makes it out like, oh, that's destiny playing out. He's supposed to die, no matter how it goes.
And it's funny because she's like, what, do you think the world revolves around Sam? Do you think that, like, he deserves to live more than other people? No, only Michael deserves to live more than other people.
Yeah.
It's very, like, she doesn't say it directly like that, but it's very, like, implied, like, she's acting as if, like, why, like, you're so selfish to put yours before her. And it's like, how is he more selfish than she is when he did it to save somebody and she's just doing it for revenge? Like, no other, it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't stop, it doesn't, like, help the situation in any way except for her to get revenge. That's the only thing gained from her position.
And then a problem Kathleen has been ignoring for a while finally comes to a head and becomes too big to ignore, literally, after a car explodes.
She's been noticing those spots on her arm all this time that have been showing up, hasn't gone to the doctor, and now she's got melanoma.
No, it's not that. It's the stuff underground that she's been ignoring and refusing to address.
Yes, the infected burst free a bunch of clickers and just start decimating her overwhelming force that she came in with.
Overwhelming. A bunch of clickers and one very large and pissed off bloater.
Yeah, this is our first exposure to bloaters.
Yeah.
It's just this massive infected clicker, this bloater, and it's just going through just rampaging, tearing people's heads off. And
it tears off Perry's head in particular. Yeah.
He sacrifices himself knowing basically that he's doomed to help Kathleen get away, but she's so focused on her revenge that in that situation, she still tries to corner Henry and Sam, even as all of her people are being killed, and she's in the middle of a field of clickers that are just going nuts. She's still trying to get her revenge in this most inopportune of moments. And ironically, she's taken out by a child clicker. Ironically, I say, because of her stance on children that we talked about before, of going like, who cares? Kids die all the time. So it's kind of like fitting that a child clicker is what kills her.
Yes. Yeah, it's very fitting.
This is kind of a brutal scene, though. Like, Ellie and Sam and Henry barely get out of this alive.
Yes.
And then we catch up with them, and they're like in, like, it looks like a motel or a hotel room.
Yeah, they're in a obviously abandoned motel just outside of town, just outside of the city, just trying to recuperate and to catch their breath and figure out their next steps. Before that, there was the intention that Sam and Henry and Joel and Ellie would go their separate ways. Henry and Joel start discussing, like, maybe Sam and Henry joining Joel and Ellie.
Yeah, which Ellie had predicted, because Joel was like, no way, they're not coming with us, like, keeping everybody at arm's length, like, no, nothing's gonna happen. Ellie's like, he says that now, but eventually he's gonna, like, be okay with it, or something. And that's exactly what ends up happening. Joel basically extends the opportunity, or the invitation to Henry, and Henry, like, is like, yeah. Joel says, we're headed to Wyoming. I don't know how we're going to get there, probably on foot. Basically lining out, this is going to be kind of a brutal journey, like a long and brutal journey. But you can come
because they had a vehicle and they now no longer have a vehicle, so yeah.
Yeah. So unfortunate. It was so badass in the last episode. They got all stocked up. They got a car, all this, like, it's like, wow, they got stocked up beyond their wildest dreams.
And
take off in one episode, it's gone,
Yeah. That's what happens when you drive into the city in these places.
Yeah, so
Joel knew it was a big risk.
So Henry's like super stoked to go with them. He's like, yeah, let's do that. And meanwhile, while this is happening, Ellie and Sam are continuing to chat about, comic books and stuff and have fun. And Sam, like, is using a message board to communicate to Ellie.
Yeah, they're right, because, again, he's deaf. And this is where we get the gut punch at the end of these 2 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because Sam reveals to Ellie that he's been bitten.
Yeah,
in the skirmish with the clickers. And Ellie, she's been told her blood is a cure. So she opens up, makes a cut on her hand, and rubs her blood on the wound. Think with the expectation that that's going to heal Sam and prevent him from turning.
I don't think it's with the expectation so much as with the hope, the desperate hope.
Yeah. Well,
she doesn't seem super, even though she's saying my blood is medicine and stuff like that, she doesn't seem super convinced.
Well, she's a bit naive on how these things work. I don't think she understands the mechanics of her blood needs to be synthesized and turned into like a vaccine first for it to like have any effect. It's kind of like this child like naivety. And so she does that. She reassures Sam, and he
says, will you make sure to stay up with me through the night?
Yeah.
He says yes, and then falls asleep.
Yes. And she wakes up.
And he's just sitting up on the bed.
Yeah.
And she goes to apologize to him for falling asleep and taps him on the shoulder, and he just turns around. He's infected.
And this is one really interesting thing too to point out, because you might think if he turned in the night, there's a plot hole. Well, why did he just attack everybody in their sleep? Well, he's deaf, and clickers, as far as we've seen, operate more on hearing than any other sense. Half of them don't even have eyes. Their eyes are completely fungused over. They operate more on hearing than any other sense. So it makes sense that without being able to hear, that he would just sit there with no other stimuli to kind of guide him in any direction. It's only when Ellie taps him on the shoulder that him as a clicker that he has some stimuli to work with. And that's when he attacks.
Yeah, he attacks her. They go flying out of the room, and that freaks out, Joel and Henry, who are like, what the fuck's going on? And Joel goes to intercept Sam and protect Ellie, and Henry immediately pulls the gun on Joel and is keeping him at his base, and he's like, what are you doing? What's going on? And he's freaking out. And then he just very quickly shoots and kills Sam himself.
Yeah, and again,
because it's instinctually he realizes he has to.
Yeah, and again, I want to stress, Henry has never shot and killed somebody. So the irony is the first person he kills is Sam, the person he dedicated his life to protecting.
The person he put himself through hell and destroyed his own conscience to protect.
Yes.
And he kills Sam and immediately is like, what did I do?
Yeah.
What did I do? He's freaking out.
The shock about what he just did. He goes into shock, essentially. He's just overwhelmed by what just happened, and he just kills himself.
Yeah. It's like I said, when he shot Sam, it's not like the resolve came over him and then he shot Sam. It's like he did it out of instinct.
Yes.
And then the second after he did that, he didn't understand why he had done that. Because he didn't get the chance to. It was all driven by instinct. And so that's why he was so in shock like that, is because he didn't come to a resolve and then kill Sam. He just instinctively did it and then was then it all caught up to him. And so he just put the gun to his own head, and Joel was desperately trying to stop him. He's like, just give me the gun, just give me the gun. No. And he shot himself, and that was it. And Joel and Ellie bury them. Ellie leaves one last message for Sam on his pad that just says, I'm sorry. And that's the tone that we leave on, is them leaving there.
This is a thing for Joel too, where Joel sees that and he thinks,
this is Ellie and me.
Yeah, this is Ellie and me. This is our fate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the episode. I did play the game to that point, obviously. But even without knowing what happens to these characters in the game, I knew Sam and Henry probably weren't going to end up with a happy ending.
Yeah, I think that seems kind of obvious.
I think the way it went down, though, was more of a gut punch than I expected. The way it went down was especially brutal.
I thought Henry was going to be infected.
Yes, I thought it was going to be Henry, too.
I thought maybe they would continue on with Sam, not permanently, but that they would continue on with Sam and lose him along the road.
Right.
That was kind of my expectation of what was going to end up happening. But, it makes more sense that you kind of got to get rid of them both together. Otherwise, you have to find a way to get rid of Sam a second time, at a different place. So it makes sense to do it this way. It does kind of fall into the tropes, though. This is you could see this exact same thing playing out in a episode of The Walking Dead or something, in the same kind of idea. It's very post-apocalyptic trope that you're going to have introduced characters, make them a parallel, make them likable, and then they have to die. Because that's kind of the theme of the show, is that Joel and Ellie are always on their own. So if they meet up with anybody and they stick with those people, then those people are probably going to die, because the show's not about the four of them, it's about the two of them. It's The Last of Us, not All of Us. But yeah, I mean, that's how this set of episodes ends. It was good. I don't think it was as good as episode 3 was. It ended up falling into a lot of the tropes that, I was having an issue with in the first 2 episodes.
I told you, like, it wasn't gonna stick.
Yeah.
The series is just, like, very tropey, and it's just gonna be that way, like, 90% of the time.
Yeah. It was still good, though. It was still enjoyable. They talked about in the after show, they have like a little thing at the end of every episode where they talk about the episode and why they made certain choices and stuff. And they talk about the fact that Sam was not deaf in the game, but that they came up with the idea of doing that in the show to kind of put another barrier between Sam and the rest of the world. Yes. And to make Sam even more reliant on Henry.
Yeah.
I think that was a clever move.
I like that they got an actual deaf actor to portray Sam. That was a nice touch.
Very charismatic little kid, too. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Great kid. Did a fantastic job with the part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope to see him in more stuff in the future because he is like just a very charismatic actor for being such a young age, so.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It was a good episode. Just back to the tropes again.
Yeah.
Did you watch the previews for next week?
I did. I completely forgot what happens. Oh, they meet up with Tommy.
Yeah. So apparently they either make it to Wyoming or Tommy's
or they find Tommy a lot sooner than Wyoming. Yeah.
And when they left, they were basically saying that by car it was going to be I think 20 something hours from the point that they entered the city.
Yes. And now they're on foot.
And now they're on foot. So.
That's like the biggest time jump so far.
Or they just happen to find a car with a working battery and gas.
Yeah. Or Tommy was a lot closer to Kansas City than I thought.
Yeah, they take the train.
Yeah, they take the train.
They fast travel the rest of the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I didn't want to do this, but let's just take out the magic map.
They just take out the map, click the spot, and they're there.
Yeah. They cross the little finger on the way.
Yeah.
So that's The Last of Us, Season 1, Episode 4, Please Hold to My Hand, and Season 1, Episode 5, Endure and Survive. Yeah, it was good. We'll see what's happening in 2 weeks because next week we are going to take another break from The Last of Us. We're basically going to cover the remaining 4 episodes of Last of Us in 2-episode chunks. We're going to have an episode of our podcast between each of those that is not related to The Last of Us and just cover 2 episodes of The Last of Us at a time for the remaining 4 episodes. Next week, we are going to be talking about John Wick. This is something that Will and I had talked about for a while that he hadn't seen John Wick and we were like, oh, we got to do something about that. We got to talk about John Wick at some point because it's interesting not just as a movie, whether the movie is good or not, but on the influence it had on action movies in its time already, that it's kind of like how you have Soulsborns or Metroidvanias. Well, now you have John Wicks, movies that are like that.
Right, yeah.
So we said we need to talk about that, and it was leaving HBO Max. It ended up going right away to Peacock. We didn't know that at the time. So he said, well, now's your chance. Go watch it, and we'll talk about it and its impact on movies and kind of how it's influencing other stuff. And it'll be an interesting and fun conversation. And so we're just going to do that next week. And then the week after, we'll cover 2 more episodes of The Last of Us to catch up on that. But that's what is coming up next week. So stay tuned for that. Until then, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. Will is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our website, thetotalscreen.com. If you open up a container story to any of our podcasts on the website, you will find all of the relevant links to our SoundCloud page, to our Facebook page, everything like that. You can find all of that there on our website, thetotalscreen.com. You can follow this podcast on our SoundCloud page, as I mentioned. You can also find our RSS feed for the podcast in those container stories as well. Or you can just go into your podcast client of choice, like Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Amazon Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anything like that, that you happen to use for your podcast listening needs, and look us up. We are the OnScreen podcast. Just look up OnScreen or the Total Screen. Hopefully you'll be able to find us. We are a pretty small podcast, so sometimes it doesn't come up right away, but you should be able to find us if you look us up, and you can add us to your library there and listen to us every week. So thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the OnScreen podcast, the official podcast of The Total Screen. Visit our website at thetotalscreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.